Okay, we're taking now. I'm going to do, how do you watch us? Welcome to our show. How do you watch us? During commercial, we got less than a minute.
Less than a minute.
Yeah, give me 5 or 10 minutes to set things up so that I can say, what does me suing Yeshiva University and getting some help from my friends in the military and some attorneys have to do with you? So let me just get to that. And then we're going to get to your website, to items 5 and 6, and to Sharif. 5, yeah, whatever.
And you want me to talk about Sharif too a little bit?
As long, yeah.
Yep.
Just go with the flow. Shh. Don't worry about it. We're going to go on now. Here we are. Hello, welcome to our show. This is Crooked Doctors. We're not a medical forum. We're Crooked Doctors. We're live every Friday from 6 to 7 p.m. Today is Friday, March 30th, 2012. I have a guest in the studio with me, Mr. Eric Martindale. He's a tenant advocate and he's the webmaster of Newark Tenants United. Thank you so much for being on my show.
Thank you for allowing me to come down.
And what we're going to do is I'm going to do a little preliminary introduction for about 5 or 10 minutes. You know that I present my show every Friday from 6 to 7, and I'm in a knockdown, drag-out federal lawsuit with Yeshiva University's medical school. So here's this big knockdown, drag-out lawsuit in New York, and what does that have to do with Newark Tenants United? So in about 5 or 10 minutes, I'm going to get through how my experience in when I was living in Jersey City comes to a tenants' rights issue. So I'm in a knockdown, drag-out lawsuit with Yeshiva University's medical school, and because I had worked in Senator Moynihan's office before I went to medical school, I'm aware that, and I got a very nice 2 letters of recommendation from Senator Moynihan's office. I'm aware that for the past like 30, 35 years, the government wants to close a medical school in New York. Now, what school can they possibly close? So they're all jockeying for position. NYU and Columbia and Cornell are all trying to combine with each other. Einstein, my medical school, which is the Albert Einstein College of Medicine of Yeshiva University, holds itself out to the general public as having expertise in psychiatry, and they claim that this is a unique niche that will prevent them from being closed. So I come along, and what I demonstrate with 2 students who came before me and 2 or 3 students who came after me is that the school does not have expertise in psychiatry. They use this as a way to falsely label students and get rid of people they don't like. And what I discover is there's John Cocasey and Heidi Weissman and Lidya Radin and Dr. Garg and another student, and we formed a student group. And there's a pattern and practice here of trying to falsely label people as mentally ill when we're not. And so my punishment for telling the truth was to be persecuted. And I started a lawsuit in 2004 because I was trying to go on with my life. I had gotten a really good offer for a job when I was living in Jersey. I'd moved from New York. I'd put the shattered pieces of my life together. I got a really good job offer from a Fortune 100 company and could not go forward with my life because at Yeshiva University, there's a foundation of false records, medical records, educational records, and financial records that are being used to ruin my life. So I go into federal court and I say, please give me my records. And that leads to a knockdown, drag-out lawsuit that leads us here today.
Because they didn't want to give you your records?
Correct. And you want to know why? Because they're falsified. And I showed you before the show started, so let me just share this with the viewing audience. Here's one example of what they don't want people to see. Now, I actually had to go through a criminal prosecution. I was asking for my letters of recommendation because Yeshiva University created a false psychological profile on me. And anything that doesn't comport with that false psychological profile, they get rid of. So I was illegally expelled because I refused to sign a contract releasing my school from liability in my case. And now I've got Jimmy David, a dishonest psychiatrist. I refused to sign a contract releasing him. He's running around telling people I'm his patient. I'm not. Telling people, you know, defaming me. I'm like, look, this is ridiculous. So here's one of my letters of recommendation. As you know, I was illegally incarcerated, and I asked for my letters of recommendation. This is my letter of recommendation from 1993 from Dr. Marco Pagnotta. Now, this was released in response to a subpoena that was made in summer of 2009. This is from Barnard College. Now, you see the letterhead's okay. The text has been, you know, they photocopied it so you can barely read it. And then over here, you've got Marco Pagnotta's signature. So if I increase the magnification a little bit, you can see what they did. Now, it's not that hard for me. Oh, it's ridiculous. I mean, these are the games. This is how I'm losing my life with these games. Look at this. Do you believe this? And as we did before the show, if I increase the magnification enough, you can kind of barely read it. And Eric, if you read this with me, it says, like if I really increase the magnification, this is an exercise I can go through. It says, I am, right here, for you reading this.
I am most happy.
Whoops, sorry. I am most happy. Go ahead.
To recommend Ms. Lidya Radin as a fine candidate for admission to medical school.
So you can see what they did here, right?
Oh, they don't like that part, because that makes you look good.
Right, exactly. It doesn't comport with their false psychological profile. And you can see it says here, as my second semester organic chemistry lecture course. And we have a lot to get through in this show, so I don't want to, you know, I don't want to belabor the point too much. But basically, this letter of recommendation from, this is from, I mean, this is really horrific. I mean, pre-meds need to know this. You give these people letters of recommendation that talk about qualities, that you're a wonderful person who would have made a great doctor, and you're trusting this school. This is a letter of recommendation from 1993. And look what they did to it. Now, I'm going out and speaking, public speaking to pre-meds saying, and wait till I get to Barnard College and say, look, this is evidence tampering. This is a crime. Okay? There was a subpoena in summer of 2009. I had to call my school and say, please give me my records. I want my records. I have the right to defend myself from persecution. The school pressed false criminal charges against me, claiming they were annoyed. They're annoyed that I actually had the temerity to call them up and said, knock it off, give me my records, I've had it with you people.
And how is that considered criminal?
It's aggravated harassment. You annoyed us. Do you want to go through this? Now, I'm fighting with a federal judge, Judge Patterson, who made up some bogus ruling that I can point to no school policy that would give me the right to access and correct my records. And I'm like, excuse me, federal judge Robert P. Patterson Jr., I don't need a school policy. I have federal law. Federal law is FERPA, Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act. I want my records. I'm going to publish these letters of recommendation. And you know why they don't want anyone to see this? Because down here it says, quote, she would be an asset. Lidya Radin would be an asset to any organization. Okay, so my letters of recommendation don't comport with the false psychological profile that my school wrote about me. And if they actually give me my records, like my executive summary, which is the false psychological profile, and I've seen this in the Abramova case and other students' cases, then they're going to have to admit that they've been persecuting me for going on 24 years now. It's just like, you know, they destroy the lives of innocent people. So as I'm digging into I want to go through this quickly so we can talk about, you know, your organization and what you're doing, and an elected official in Newark who's helping. So I'm in Newark, I'm in Jersey City, New Jersey. I'm fighting a good fight. I'm going to Washington. I'm lobbying my elected officials. You know, I'm trying to get other students are calling me. I'm pivotal because other students are building their cases on mine to show that this is a pattern and practice of deceptive practices and persecuting innocent students. Anyone at Yeshiva University who doesn't comport with an Orthodox Jewish view gets railroaded out. A gay man who came out of the closet, 2 lesbian students they didn't like. There was an Orthodox Jewish woman who was a Bulgarian Jew, and she's seen as black. They didn't like her. They had an Orthodox Jewish girl call me and ask me for help. I couldn't believe it. There was an Orthodox Jewish man who had a learning disability, and his financial records were falsified. So he was being asked to pay for classes he never took. It's unbelievable. These people are a criminal entity. That's what they are. They claim that they're non-denominational. They're not. You know.
Wait, back up one second.
Sure.
How does a non-denominational college fit in with the whole funding thing? Why don't you explain that a little bit?
Well, Yeshiva University held its claim that they were non-denominational. They're not. And what happened was, and this is what I discovered in the Bob Jones University case. That's why this is very important. Bob Jones University was
about that racist university.
It was a witch hunt. Yeah, it was a witch hunt. They were painted with a brush of racism, and what happened was there was a purely theoretical argument. Oh, let me qualify my remarks. I was labeled as a white racist cracker because I started talking about the Bob Jones University case. And what the school can't stand is that after my legal expulsion, I actually wrote grants for the Harlem community. So I am not a white racist cracker. What I'm pointing out is that there are fabricated, made-up arguments to persecute this Christian school. And basically what they did is they shut down, the federal government decided to go after Bob Jones. We're 10 minutes into the show, so I'm going to start grossly oversimplifying because I want to cut through to get to your organization and how does this all tie in together. Okay. So I discovered the Bob Jones University case. They fabricated an argument. It was a witch hunt. They claimed that if you were, the United States Supreme Court claimed that if you were a school that discriminated, you would lose your tax exemption. And this is happening in the late 60s, early 70s, and it's being carried through to about the 80s. And I remember the Jerry Falwell interviews. So what the school did was they rejected the public money, they went private, and now they're just, private school with no public money. But in the Bob Jones University case in the late 60s, early 70s, the IRS sent a letter to all schools, including Yeshiva, saying if you discriminate, we're going to pull your tax exemption. Now, Yeshiva University, since about the late 60s, early 70s, has been living in fear because they are not a non-denominational school. They are an Orthodox Jewish school. They want to be an Orthodox Jewish school, but they want the public money. So what they do is they lie.
They want their cake and they want to eat it too.
Or as the Croatians would say, there's I'm Croatian, I'm Serbo-Croatian, and the Croatians say they want to sit on 2 seats. That's why they fall to the ground. So that's exactly it. Thank you. So what happens is for the last 30, 40 years, they're living in fear because they're afraid that someone like me is going to come along and say, oh my gosh, you guys have been running a massive fraud. And guess who came along? In 1999, Diane Persky, a conservative Jewish woman, she was like an associate dean at Girls College, sued Yeshiva University successfully for religious discrimination. She was told she wasn't Orthodox enough. Okay?
And then you're definitely not Orthodox enough because you're not even Jewish.
Correct.
Okay.
So in 1999, you don't have to prove that they discriminate on the basis of religion. Diane Persky did it for you. I called Diane Persky up on the phone. I'm discussing this. She's laughing. She's like, Lydia, the entire New York Jewish community knows that this school is lying. So we're talking. So I'm like, excuse me, but if they've already been found to discriminate on the basis of religion, how come their tax exemption hasn't been pulled? And I go down to Washington. I started.
Well, who would actually pull the exemption? Who does that?
The IRS.
Okay.
So how come there's this double standard? You know, the Christian school, it's a purely fabricated argument. There are no victims of Bob Jones University. Nobody comes forward and says they've been harmed by this school. Here's Yeshiva University, an Orthodox Jewish school. They lie and say they're non-denominational. They're not. They get innocent people like me get sucked into here because, you know, they need to satisfy the diversity requirement. Other innocent people get sucked in. If you had simply said, we're an Orthodox Jewish school, I would have said, thanks so much. I've got offers to go somewhere else. You know, I can go to a state school. I can go to another medical school. I don't have to come to this Orthodox Jewish school. I'm not Orthodox Jewish. I don't want an Orthodox Jewish lifestyle imposed on me. If you had simply been honest, I would have been living a happy life somewhere else. But you sucked me in, you lied, you fraudulently induced me to enter to your school, and then there was no intention for me to graduate. Horrible. And had the victims of Yeshiva University, like Heidi Weissman, John Kilcasey, Dr. Garg, had these people gone out into the public forum and started saying, Yeshiva University is dangerous to others. This is a clear and present danger. Do not go there. And you would go to another school, you'd be fine. So I start lobbying my elected officials. I want my records. I want to correct my records. I'm tired of being persecuted by these people. How come there's this double standard? That leads me to Mr. Mikey Weinstein, because I've got a Christian school that's being persecuted. I've got 6 Christian ministers who are being persecuted. Their tax exemption is being questioned. I'm like, oh, that's nice. How come nobody's questioning Yeshiva University's tax exemption? Can someone explain this to me? I go down there, I talk to Senator Grassley. Senator Grassley, can you please tell me why you're going after these Christian ministers? We'll get into that in a minute. So I start making some noise. I have friends in the military. One happens to be an attorney. I run a lot of my arguments past him, and he says, Lydia, you go to every single undergraduate school you can, and you warn them about this school, because you're putting them on notice. Oh, they didn't like that. They're like, you're putting them, so now when you go to Columbia University and you tell your dean, you know, you have a responsibility as part of the advising relationship to let your pre-meds know. If you had told me, I would have gone somewhere else. So now if you send a pre-med to Yeshiva University's medical school, and something, you know, what happened, they get persecuted like I was persecuted, or like the gay man who came out of the closet was persecuted, or the 2 lesbians who were persecuted, or Heidi Weissman was persecuted, or John Kilcasey was persecuted. You're going to love this. John Kilcasey was persecuted because he stood up and said, I'm not lying, and then they went after him like gangbusters. That's another show.
So what did they do to you with your tenant issue? So
I'm cutting to the chase now. So one of the schools that I went to was West Point, and I sat down and I had a meeting with Major Maddox. Major Maddox was the executive officer to Robert Caslin, and there are these 4 generals that are being persecuted, because you know there's a great big wall of separation of churches.
The generals are being persecuted?
Oh yeah, 4 generals, Caslin, Sutton, Catton, and Brooks.
Who can persecute a general?
Mr. Mikey Weinstein of Military Religious Freedom Foundation is hunting these generals. So I call up Mr. Mikey Weinstein, and Mr. Mikey Weinstein, who by the way I like and respect. I'm having conversations with Mr. You'll like Mr. Mikey Weinstein. On many issues, Mr. Mikey Weinstein is correct. I like him. I respect him. He's a former White House attorney. On many issues, he is right. On this issue, he's wrong. So I'm talking to Mr. Mikey Weinstein. Guess what? He went to Yeshiva University. He asked them for money. They said no. So we had a conversation about this. Why aren't they contributing to your Military Religious Freedom Foundation? He claimed that what they said was that he wasn't Jewish enough and that his wife wasn't Jewish enough.
Weinstein?
Mr. Mikey Weinstein. Apparently he wasn't Orthodox enough. Okay. Just like Diane Persky wasn't Orthodox enough. But really, they didn't want to get involved with Mr. Weinstein because he's too high profile. And what they were afraid of, Mikey Weinstein is very high profile. So what they were afraid of is that Yeshiva University was afraid, Mr. Weinstein, that if they gave his Military Religious Freedom Foundation money, that people would start looking and that they'd realize, you know.
If they're that would question their tax exemption.
Exactly. So then, you know, it would be found that, oh, look, they were found to discriminate on the basis of religion. Why do they still have their tax exemption? So in order to create this great big dust cloud, they created a false argument to go after these Christian ministers and question their tax exemption. So I'm like, well, if you're questioning the Christian minister's tax exemption, why isn't anyone questioning Yeshiva University's tax exemption? Mr. Mikey Weinstein, if you're building a great big wall of separation of church and state in the military, where's the great big wall of separation of church and state at Yeshiva University? I confront District Attorney Vance. I put my motion to dismiss in his hands and I say, you don't have a case against me. You just don't like the fact that I'm making very sound arguments that there is this double standard in America. I call a Harvard professor. I run everything by him. By the way, I'm writing a PhD thesis, and I'm going to need some collaboration. So basically, I'm asking a lot of questions that people don't want discussed, okay?
Basically, you're a troublemaker.
I'm not a troublemaker. I respect authority. And when Mr. Mikey Weinstein and I had a conversation, he said, Lydia, these people are bigots. Just say it. It's not anti-Semitic to tell the truth. I'm Jewish. I'm not Jewish enough for them. My wife is Jewish. She's not Jewish enough for them. I respect Mr. Mikey Weinstein. He told me to tell the truth, and I did. I went up to West Point. I talked to Major Maddox. I put documents in his hands. Those documents, Major Maddox is the executive officer to Robert Caslin. That means this general has my documents as part of his personal papers, and I want them back personally. And so when I'm up at West Point discussing this, and this two-star general said, Lydia, you're talking to a two-star. You got to talk to a four-star. So I did. I went to Washington. I got myself a four-star general. And I talked to him. And I tried to make Colonel Fetterman, who was an attorney at the Pentagon who was supposed to help me, look good. So here I am making a lot of noise. And people want me to shut up, right? So they can't persecute me. If I have a job, they'll harass me at my job. So what they start to do is harass me at my apartment.
And what's the connection between these folks and your landlord? I don't get it.
Okay, so my landlord, I'm living in Jersey City, and my landlord hires this dishonest attorney named Nino Falcone, and he's a municipal court judge. If I had a job, I would be harassed at my job. I have an apartment, I'm being harassed at my apartment. And I go through 3 frivolous evictions where my landlord is like making stuff up to get me out of the apartment. And I explained to my landlord since day one.
What does that have to do with these folks?
Well, I'm making a lot of noise. I'm going to Washington, I'm going to Albany.
So you think that these folks are talking to your landlord?
They are.
Can you prove it?
Of course I can, because as soon as my landlord said, you know, I'd like you to move, I said, you know, Ralph Pagnozzi, I'd like to move. This is happening in February of 2007. I said, listen, Ralph, I'm going to tell you, nobody lives like, you know, he comes to my apartment. I have legal papers all over the living room. Who lives like this, right? So I'm like, Ralph.
That's none of his business.
Well, that's true. But I'm like, Ralph, I'm going to tell you something. You want me to move because you think you can get more money for this apartment. That's fine with me. I'd like to move. I can't. My medical school, Ralph, has falsified my financial records, and they've had me illegally declared in default on a federal student loan that I wasn't eligible.
You got to be kidding me.
No. They had me illegally declared in default on a federal student loan I was not eligible to receive. I have the
wait, back up. You never received the loan.
No, I got the loan. Yeshiva University took $18,500 for classes that I never took, and now they want me to pay it back.
Oh my God.
And it's like over $50,000.
Oh my God.
And I refuse to pay them. And I'm having these knockdown, drag-out fights with Sally May. Sally May is lying. An Orthodox Jewish man calls me up and says they did the same thing to him. We form a group. We go up to Albany. We sit down with the guarantee agency, the supervising attorney, Cheryl Fisher. We're like, look, this is ridiculous. They make up all these stupid arguments. I'm like, I'm not a full-time student. I never took these classes. I'm not going to pay for this. And so... oh, yeah, this was like, you would not believe this stuff. I had to go down to Washington. They were committing fraud in student loan programs.
So they're in cahoots with your landlord in some way?
Well, in February of 2007, before I get harassed at my apartment, my landlord comes to me and says, look, I think I can get more money. Jersey City is starting to come up a little. I think I can get more money for this apartment. I'd like you to move. And I say, you know, that wouldn't be a problem, except I'm never going to get another apartment because I can't pass the background check. My medical school has falsified my financial records. I have the black mark of a defaulted student loan on my credit reports for life. My medical school has falsified my educational records. We've just seen an example of evidence tampering. They falsified medical, you know, Ralph, where am I going to go? So I make a good faith effort. I'm telling him everything that's going on. He knew. I went to some of the nicest, landlords in town. I tried everything, and there's no way I'm going to get another apartment. A landlord keeps coming after me, and every step along the way, as we're in a landlord-tenant court, as I'm talking to his attorney, I'm at Summit Avenue with Judge Rodriguez. I couldn't even get a public defender when they pressed false criminal charges against me that were ultimately dismissed. I'm with Judge Rodriguez filling out a request for a public defender, and I say, look, my financial records are falsified. I'm showing case law. I'm showing how they falsified this. Nobody wants to do anything, because once you catch a school in fraud in federal student loan programs, the government feels they've been very generous, and they've been subject to every single criminal scheme, and they lay down the law, and they said, if we catch you in fraud, we pull the program forever, and there's no way for you to establish eligibility. So Yeshiva University loses its ability to administer federal student loans.
Oh, that would destroy them.
Hello. So now they're coming after me. So my landlords knew. I kept them fully informed. Everybody in Jersey City knew. In 2005, I discovered these falsified records. I filed a police report. The Bronx DA knew. Everybody knew. So
you think that your landlord is talking to?
Of course they are. I even have an affidavit that says, before I was physically assaulted in Jersey City in 2008, that some of the people who are acting with my landlord and his attorney made a phone call to Yeshiva University. So I even have Yeshiva University's own counsel, John Scarfone, in an affidavit says, yes, I got this phone call. And they didn't like the fact that I was publishing evidence on a blog, that I was credible, that I was naming names, because I had it, I just had it. So there I am in Jersey City. I've gone through, we're almost halfway through, so I want to cut through this a little bit so we can get to your stuff. I'm being harassed. I've won 3 frivolous evictions against my landlords. I won a small claims action against them. I'm going into frivolous eviction number 4. And I say to, I get a pro bono attorney from a nonprofit group, and I say, you know something? I've had it. I keep winning against my landlords, and this is costing me money and time and energy. And my landlords, as part of frivolous eviction number 4, where they're making up an excuse, they present me with a renewal lease, and the lease is not fair to me. So we're going into this lease, and I say, I'm challenging the lease. There are paragraphs in the lease I don't like. They're not fair to me. And one of those paragraphs says that if my landlords win, I should pay their attorney's fees. So I say, well,
that's basically boilerplated. Every lease in New Jersey has that clause.
Okay, good. You check this for me.
Yeah.
Okay. So I say, I want the same consideration.
Absolutely.
Right. So as we had gone in, this is Judge Fast's ruling, right? You see this from September 3rd, 2008. And here's how my attorney, Lawrence Sidoni, screwed me. And right here, I'm going to pull this up very quickly. So I'm going to change the camera view. And what we're looking at is this right here. This was Judge Fast's ridiculous ruling. This is what we're looking at. You have a hard copy in front of you, right, Eric? Mm-hmm. Okay, so this was the ruling. This is Lawrence Sidoni from Northeast New Jersey Legal Services. This was my case. And we're looking right here at this page. This is page 6. And I had said, let me bring this back to us. I had said, if my landlords are asking that I should pay their attorney's fees.
If they win.
Correct. Then I should have the same consideration.
If you win.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Based on the principle of unconscionability. So I'm challenging this lease, and this is one paragraph. Now, what I discovered, it was in New Jersey, there's no law that would give attorneys' fees the right to recover, that would give tenants the right to recover attorney's fees. But there is a law in New York. So when I'm talking to Mr. Sidoni, I say, I want you in my final submissions to Judge Fast to put that law in my papers. Okay? And this is the law. And you've looked at this, right? We've discussed this.
Absolutely. We've discussed that.
So this is the law from New York, and this is called, this is real property law right here.
There shall be implied in such lease a covenant by the landlord to pay to the tenant the reasonable attorney's fees and or expenses incurred by the tenant as a result of the failure of the landlord to perform any covenant or agreement on its part to be performed under the lease or in the successful defense of any action or summary proceeding commenced by the landlord against the tenant arising out of the lease.
Okay, so we've got real property law, section 234, which basically, if we cut through all the legalese, says, hey, if it says in your lease that your landlord can ask for attorney's fees if he wins against the tenant, then it's implied, because this is the principle of unconscionability, we don't draft unconscionable contracts, where one party has all the power and the other party has none, that if the tenant wins against the landlord, the tenant can ask for attorney's fees too.
It seems logical. I can't imagine it being otherwise.
It's simple common sense, right? If you cut through all the legalese. So I asked Mr. Lawrence Sidoni, I say, please include this. And what he did was he deliberately, intentionally, maliciously, willfully, knowingly, this is language with criminal intent.
He did not include it.
Correct. And if you just be so he did this deliberately. He wanted to create a hole in my case.
But why would he do that? Why?
Well, because if I had actually won, again, remember, I'm not operating in a vacuum, right? 3 steps behind me is my medical school.
Right.
And 23 years ago, they drafted an executive summary that was some falsified psychological profile, some excuse to get rid of me. And if I demonstrate increased functioning or that I'm a success in life, then why did you kick her out of medical school?
Well, obviously you're a success. You have the show here.
Well, I don't know.
And you're broadcasting, and you're making a lot of sense to me, at least.
Thank you. And I was offered a job with a Fortune 100 company even after you ruined my life. But the bottom line is, so 3 steps behind me, I'm not operating in a vacuum, are people who don't like me. And if I had won this, first let's show them right here. What does this part say to create a big hole? This is page 6, where it says right here. Whoops, sorry. Here we go. Defendant cited no authority. That's the key point. No authority to support the obligation of a landlord to reimburse a tenant even when the tenant is successful in defending an eviction. Okay, so that's the whole. And I knew that was going to happen. So I said to Mr. Sidoni, look, Judge Fast is going to rule against me because there's no law in New Jersey, but I can reasonably cite to the law in New York. So please include the New York law so the judge will have some authority.
Right. Well, as you know, that might be changing, and there might be a law in New Jersey.
Good. Good. So in 2008, when this happened, this is 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. You're not stopping us. Why? Because I met Mr. Martindale, and I was referred to you by tenant advocates in Jersey City. They said, go talk to Eric. And what do you have? You have this lovely little website. Let's go to your website. And you want to talk a little bit about your website?
Well, it's called Newark Tenants United.org. And there are 3 tenant associations within the website organization, which are my buildings on Mount Prospect Avenue, the Colonnade, and the Pavilion. Then we have a tenant resource directory, which is basically advice to tenants on what to do in various situations. And of course the homepage, and the homepage has the Newark Tenants agenda, if you want to scroll down, Lydia.
Sure.
And we actually have 13 different items on there, and we're going to be discussing in a little bit more detail 2 of them today. And item number 6 is the state legislation for legal fee equality.
So wait, we're going a little too fast, but basically you've got this website, you're the webmaster for New York Tenants United. This is not going to be your sole appearance on my show, because what I volunteer, you've got this tenants agenda, it's a 13-point agenda. You got some support from City Councilman Sharif, and I'm pleased to say that City Councilman Sharif, let's show him, has already put us on his schedule, and next week we're going to do 15 minutes with City Councilman Sharif. We presented in front of City Councilman Sharif. This is his website, and we asked, you invited me out to one of your City Council meetings, And he's a wonderful guy, by the way. I had a meeting with him very briefly yesterday where I said, you know,
let me
go ahead.
interject a little bit about Sharif. He ran as an independent.
He did?
It's very difficult for an independent candidate to win, even in a small suburban town. In a big city like Newark, with his 5 wards, he ran as an independent, and he won.
That's fabulous. That is absolutely fabulous. So City Councilman Sharif has agreed to be on our show next week on Crooked Doctors, and we're going to discuss how he's supporting some of the issues on the tenants' agenda in Newark, because this helps tenants. And what I didn't know, here's City Councilman Sharif. We're going to devote a whole show to him next week where we can discuss the law that we want passed, and we're going to talk about what a wonderful guy he is. And I was very impressed yesterday when I went to talk to him. He was a really good person. But he's going to discuss how he supports some of the tenants' agenda for Newark, because what I didn't know was that Newark is 75% tenants.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's huge. So one of the issues that I asked, I went to Eric Martindale, and my guest, and I said, listen, there's no law in New Jersey that would give tenants the right to recover attorney's fees. Let's make one. And we are.
So what I did is I talked to the New Jersey Tenant Organization, located in Hackensack, and Matt Shapiro and Mitch Kahn over there in that organization. And there was initially a little bit of resistance, but after a couple of communications, they came on board and they said they're going to push this. And that's really the critical thing, because they have the contact with the legislators who would actually introduce the legislation in Trenton. So this is a pending action. It's going to be introduced. Not sure if I have the authority to reveal the name of the person who's going to be introducing it, but they're basically going to copy New York's law with very little or no changes, and they're going to introduce it in Trenton. And the rationale is that our Governor Christie is an attorney, so it stands to reason that an attorney will understand the idea of legal fee equality, that if one party stands to win in the case, then the other party can also get, if they win, that they would also be able to get the attorney's fees.
Right.
It's only fair. And what we're hoping is that if the legislation is passed, maybe some of the landlords will take that clause out of the lease, because they don't want the tenants winning any type of compensation. And the way the compensation would work, presumably, is that it would be a credit against future rent, because landlord-tenant court in New Jersey is not allowed to give an actual cash award, but they can potentially give a credit towards future rent. So they're working out the details on how it's going to be worded with that issue in particular, and it will be introduced soon, and we're expecting it to be very controversial, and for all the landlords to oppose it, and all the landlords' attorneys to oppose it.
But here's the thing for Mr. Christie, which I think is very interesting. He's a Republican, and it's his Republican mandate to take the burden off taxpayers and create new sources of revenue in the private sector. So Mr. Lawrence Sidoni was part of a legal aid society. This is basically legal aid, Northeast New Jersey Legal Services. We pay taxes. We got this legal aid society. They can only handle a limited number of cases.
Right.
So I'm like, well, if you allow tenants to recover attorney's fees, then attorneys in the private sector would be able to get their fees paid. So you don't need to have, Northeast New Jersey Legal Services so big, and you're taking some of the burden off, because I wouldn't have to go there. I could take my meritorious cases to a private attorney. We're developing new sources of revenue in the private sector while relieving the tax burden. This is exactly the Republican mandate. And, if you run this past a Republican like Mr. Mikey Weinstein, he would support it. This is number 6 on your tenants.
Well, let me
you want to read
off
this?
there, because I don't totally agree with some of her rationale. We've discussed this before. That
we have spirited debate
to set up a system which allows not landlords, but lawyers to get rich isn't necessarily the way to convince a Republican that this is a good program. I think that just the fairness aspect of it is the way to persuade the more conservative legislators, even some of the conservative Democratic legislators, that receive a lot of campaign contributions from landlords and attorneys. And let's face it, there's an organization called NJAA, the Jersey Apartment Owners Association, and they are bigger and more powerful than they've ever been. And they're on a roll right now. They're trying to repeal all the tenant laws in New Jersey, and the New Jersey Tenants Organization is basically sounding the alarm across the entire state that it's time to not only to defend the laws, but let's come out with a few things of our own that we can have some momentum on our side. Because we're really in a terrible time in New Jersey from the standpoint of tenants' rights and things being potentially rolled back. And at the same time, the lawyers for the landlords are becoming just absolutely ferocious. And she mentioned 3 or 4 frivolous cases. The head of one of my sister tenant associations in Newark, she's been to court 24 times, 23 or 24 times.
On false criminal charges.
And there's been false criminal charges, and
she was falsely accused of making terroristic threats.
Well, terroristic threats is the new, what's the term I'm looking for? It's the new boogeyman out there. If you want to show someone's a bad guy, you just say he or she made terroristic threats, whether it's true or not.
Well, in New Jersey, if you're making terroristic threats, you can be evicted in 3 days. So I was falsely accused when my landlords hired this dishonest judge. Let me say his name, Nino Falcone, dishonest municipal court judge Nino Falcone, lawyer from New Jersey, dishonest, threatened me. We'll get to him later. But basically, when my landlords hired him and he was angry and frustrated that he kept losing, I was falsely accused of making terroristic threats. And, I had to go through, my cases got so Looney Tunes that I actually had to go, hang on to your hat, I actually had to go to Washington and get a security liaison officer to say, you never made terroristic threat. I never threatened to blow up a school in Washington. Do you know how outrageous that is? False accusations of being a terrorist is now the new McCarthyism.
Yeah.
It's a new way to blacklist you. But our efforts to pass a new law where if landlords are able to recover attorney's fees, tenants should be able to cover attorney's fees are item 6 in your agenda, your tenant's agenda. And if you'd be so kind as to read it, because I'm going to show it.
Okay.
Here you go. It's right up here. You can look at our...
I have it here.
Okay.
Every lease has a boilerplated clause that the tenant pays the landlord's legal fees if they lose in court. However, the reverse is typically not granted, which is unusual in the field of law. If the lease has the legal fee clause, then the lease should also state that the tenants would be entitled to legal fees if the tenant wins in court. Passage of such legislation would maintain the basic principle of fairness and equity, and it could prompt many landlords to remove the clause from their leases in its entirety. That would help lead society in a less litigious direction. This legislation is being generated by tenant activists in Jersey City and Newark, and has the support of the New Jersey Tenants Organization. We request official support and lobbying action from the Newark Mayor and City Council, including securing the co-sponsorship of all legislators representing parts of Newark. So generally speaking, the way I try to get things done is act within the system, do things quietly and professionally, be organized, but let them know that we're firm and that we're not going to waver. So I try to stay away from outlandish or exaggerated statements, and we don't make threats, and we try to do things in a civil manner to get things done. And if you go down to a Newark City Council meeting, everyone speaking on any issue, they're basically just a bunch of raving lunatics on every possible issue you can imagine. From Mayor Booker not being black enough to be mayor of Newark, to accusations of all sorts of things. And then we get up, the tenant advocates, and we just make decent professional speeches, and the council actually responds to us. They appreciate that people are actually coming to them with real ideas and real proposals, and that includes my councilman Aníbal Ramos in the North Ward, as well as Sharif, and really everyone on the city council. As far as I'm concerned, they're all good guys and good ladies, and we don't have any issue with them. We support them, and we want them to support the tenants agenda for Newark, and over the next year or two, we want to go through all the items and get ordinances or city policies created to address the issues. Basically.
Now, it's of critical importance in Newark because Newark is 75% tenants. And another issue that came up most recently is, and again, this is item 5 on your agenda. So while we're working to get a new law passed in Jersey, and we're making strides towards that, so you can't keep us down, and you do get a lot of respect. When you invited me to the Newark City Council and you introduced me around, you do get a lot of respect because you try to work within the system. You try to change the system. One of the things that you would like to see, and that brings us to item 5, is that what's happening is what we're discovering is, and this is particularly true in Newark, is that landlords, there's no polite way to say it, so I'm just going to speak freely. Landlords decide to deceive their tenants because they think we're stupid by including clauses in their leases which are illegal. And they think, we just fell, we're dumb and we just fell off the turnip truck and we're going to fall for that. So when I got out of Rikers, my life has been ruined. I've got to clear my name. I'm going through a criminal appeal. I've got more issues than I know what to do with. There was this very nice woman. She's 82 years old. She's a Jehovah's Witness. I knew her daughter. By the way, I'm going to start wearing my prison uniform as a badge. I'm going to start wearing greens, my prison uniform as a badge of courage.
On your show?
I'm going to start wearing, I'm selling all my clothes, and I'm going to...
You have a prison uniform with numbers on it?
No, you wear green. You wear a green shirt and green pair of pants, and it's made of this canvas material.
Oh.
It's like a uniform. Okay. I've been wearing the same clothes for like 3 months. I'm like, I might as well be in uniform. I'm going to start wearing... I'm not ashamed of what happened. What Yeshiva University did to me was wrong. I was railroaded. I got to go faster, okay, because we have 15 minutes left. So as a symbol, I'm going to start wearing my prison uniform. While I was in prison, there were inmates who were wrongly convicted, and we used to make jokes about our public defenders. We used to say they're not public defenders, they're public pretenders, because they pretend to defend you. So when I got out of Rikers, there was a woman who gave me a place to live. I thought it was temporary. While I tried to get my apartment back. And what I discovered was she asked me to help her out a little bit, and I looked at some of her bills, and what I discovered was that her landlord, Mr. Gilbert Polinsky, had actually cheated her out of her senior citizens discount. So I advocated for her. I went down to his office, and I actually got her a $7,300 refund, plus $200 in legal fees. So I got her, that's an admission of guilt that she's been paying this rent overcharge because he hasn't been giving her her senior citizens discount. And when I looked at her lease, I found out that, guess what? It's not just the tenants in Newark who have landlords who are drafting illegal leases, but Mr. Gilbert Polinsky drafted an illegal lease. And right here, we're in court right now. In fact, we have to go back to court on April 4th. Mr. Gilbert Polinsky claims, and I'm going to show you, this is Exhibit A. Just 1 second. I'm going to show you that Mr. Gilbert Polinsky has oh my goodness, what did I do here? Usually I get brownie points for this, but let me get back to my desktop. Okay. Let me get to, here we go. I think it's this one. Nope, that's not the one I want. I want to get to Exhibit A. What I discovered was, and I filed complaints with, here we go, this is Exhibit A. You've got a copy of it in front of you right here. Now, what this landlord did is we went into court, and since this tenant, the very nice lady that I'm staying with, got a credit of $7,300 for rent overcharge, Now what we're fighting about is, can she prove that this overcharge was willful? Because if she can show, and I checked with a police detective, if she can show that her landlord willfully deceived her into making these overpayments, she can get triple damages. So,
I like that law.
Yeah, I like that too. So a police detective about a year ago told me what to look for. I gathered up the evidence. We went into court. I said, we went into court. The landlord claims that she's not paying the rent. I'm like, she shouldn't be paying the rent. She got a huge credit. And he claims, we made a counterclaim, and he claims she has no right to make a counterclaim. And she claims, that's ridiculous, because she signed a lease. And he claims that she has no right to a jury trial because she signed a lease. So here's a landlord. This is not a theory now, because one of the things on your tenant's agenda is that in Newark, landlord, what the Newark Tenants United feels is, if you're a tenant and you've got this illegal lease with these illegal clauses, there should be a judicial review process. And if you go into court and you have a judge review an illegal lease, the judge should say this lease is illegal and order the landlord to rewrite all the leases.
Right.
But what problem do you have if the system is so corrupt, as I'm demonstrating, that the judge right now, Judge Linda C. Lay, who I'm sure doesn't like me anymore, has an illegal lease in front of her. And she's got a lease, she's got affidavits from a landlord that says, because this woman signed a lease, she gave up her rights to a counterclaim. That's a lie. And she gave up her right to a jury trial. That's a lie.
One of the problems is that basically all the leases have these clauses. So if you're going to be a tenant in New Jersey, you have no choice but to sign one of these leases. And that's the problem. And what we really need in New Jersey, I don't know how this is ever going to happen, but what we really need is to have one uniform residential lease.
As an example.
Just like they have a uniform mortgage application, and that was done many years ago because there was so many smoke and mirrors and corruption in the mortgage process. They decided, we're just going to have one form residential mortgage application. We need that for leases because we're having the same problem here, that there's all these crazy clauses, and the attorneys, they know what the law is. All right, the attorney for my building, Bruce Gooden, who, by the way, is a graduate of Lydia's favorite university. Yeshiva
University, where they teach them to, okay, we'll get down there. Okay.
Anyway, he knows the law so well in New Jersey. He's actually considered one of the leading experts in the whole state. He conducts seminars at events of the New Jersey Apartment Owners Association, where he advises landlords and other attorneys as to what the law is in tenant law. And you can Google his name, and you can see all sorts of information on this guy. He's a big figure in New Jersey.
And he goes after tenant leaders, doesn't he?
And he writes the lease, and it's got all these illegal clauses, things that are completely preposterous.
That are ridiculous. Let's give an example.
I don't understand how he, as an attorney, is allowed to write a lease with illegal things in it.
Well, that I'd like to know that too. Like, the attorneys know that this is wrong.
And what are the recourses? How do we stop these attorneys from drafting these leases for the landlords?
So I'm showing an example now of, we're in court right now with this is Gilbert Polinsky, and this is an affidavit. We're in front of Judge Linda C. Lay. This is the index number, and Natasha Phillips is a bookkeeper that works for Gilbert Polinsky, and she's swearing in court that the tenant, that her counterclaim should be dismissed. Do you see this? Let me make it bigger. Her counterclaim should be dismissed because it's barred by the party's lease. Okay, that's illegal.
That's absolutely illegal.
Okay, so every single person involved in this case, the tenant's attorney, the judge, all these people know that that's illegal. Here's the other thing she says. I love this as a civil rights issue. The defendant, the tenant, says if this thing were to go to trial, she wants this in front of a jury. And look what they say: striking the respondent, that would be the tenant's jury demand, as same as barred by the party's lease. Now, you did not give your right up to a jury, your right to a jury trial. You didn't forego your right to a jury trial just because you signed a lease. Eric, is this the most outrageous thing you've ever seen?
It's up there. Yep.
Okay, so now you're telling me that, I mean, I'm talking to this is illegal. It's deceptive business practices. Deceptive business practices are criminal in New York. You're trying to fool tenants into thinking they can give up their civil rights just because they signed a lease. Gilbert Polinsky is the dishonest landlord who thinks he can deceive this little old lady. She's an 82-year-old Jehovah's Witness. And I'm like, excuse me, ma'am, these people are lying to you. His dishonest attorney is this guy named Stephen A. Can you pronounce that?
Rubenstein?
Is that how you pronounce Rubenstein? I confronted him in court. He's so embarrassed he ran away from me. He turned red. The attorney, Patrick Mark, was the guy we hired and then just got fired because he knows. I'm talking to this guy, Patrick Mark. He's the tenant's attorney. I'm like, excuse me, Mr. Mark. When the landlord lies to this degree, you do not continue to argue the merits of your case. You go to the judge. The judge in this case is Judge Linda C. Lay. This is the index number. She's at 441 Livingston Street in Brooklyn, New York, in Housing Court, Part D, room 407. I'm like, you go to the judge and you say, I want this case dismissed against my client, the defendant, the tenant, with prejudice, because when the landlord's attorneys lie to this amount, this degree, I do not continue to argue the merits of my case. I want this dismissed. This is wrong, and that's what should happen. So I'm advocating for this woman, and they're doing everything they can to shut me up. So I went to,
Now this is the woman who basically opened her house to you to give you a place to live.
Temporarily. Well, I thought it would be like days to weeks until I got my apartment back, but I go...
So she's really being a good citizen, helping you out.
Yeah.
And one of the things they wanted to get her on was that she's not supposed to have someone else living with her in the lease. That's also illegal.
Correct. In New York, there's something called, it's in layman's terms, it's called the roommate law. And you're allowed to have a roommate if you want. So I have a tape-recorded conversation with Gilbert Polinsky where he's ordering me out of the apartment, and he says, it's in the lease, you can't be there. I'm like, no, sir. There is a real property law in New York that says she can have a roommate if she wants. And in fact, he knows he's lying because I talked to another tenant in the building, and she's like, oh, I've had a roommate forever. Mr. Polinsky, the landlord, knows.
Right.
Okay, so the landlords lie.
Well, you know, it's one thing if an apartment is overcrowded, but it's another thing if a single person is in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment and they're trying to help a person who would be otherwise homeless, and you're going to have that person, you know, live with you. That should be looked upon as a good thing for society because you're reducing the drain on social services and you're keeping somebody from being homeless. And you're going to go after that 82-year-old lady who's helping somebody out and say, no, everyone in the apartment has to be signed on the lease. That's ridiculous.
But
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, but she has the absolute right under New York state law to have it's called illegal restrictions on occupancy. And this law was done, we've got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to go a little faster. This law was done because you can imagine all kinds of situations where people would be temporarily homeless and they would have to move in with friends or relatives. Mm-hmm. Like when I was having my apartment painted for a couple days, you know, I moved in with a friend. And you're saying, what, I should go to a homeless shelter because my friend can't have me?
That would be, presumably, that would be having a guest for a couple of days is different from having a resident. But even if you were living there for months, that should be allowed. Now, I don't know what the law is in New Jersey on that. I don't know. But I know our landlord has come after different people on that same issue.
But in New York, you're protected by law. So Betty's lease is illegal. She absolutely has the right to a jury trial. Betty's lease is illegal. She absolutely has the right to a counterclaim. She has the right to have a roommate if she wants. It's by New York state law. And if she wins against her landlord, she has the right to recover attorney's fees. Right. So she's absolutely on point with the law. And we've got this judge who apparently is being lied to by the attorneys in the case. So I actually went to the Brooklyn district attorney, and here's another enemy I'm about to make. Anthony Borowski is a paralegal.
Calm down with the enemies. Calm down with the enemies.
They don't like it because I'm strong enough to stand up to them.
I'm trying to train her to go about things a little bit more passively.
No. I'm done with that. 23 years of persecution, I'm done with that. So I'm standing up to Mr. Anthony Borowski. I bring the lady in with me. We go to Anthony Borowski. He's a paralegal at the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. And I show him this. I sit down with Mr. Anthony Borowski. I say, Mr. Borowski, on one page with 2 examples, this lease is illegal. Please help protect this little old lady. And here's what he says. but he looks at her and he goes, but you signed this, didn't you? You agreed to it, didn't you? Didn't you? Didn't you? I'm like, I'm looking at this guy going, are you trying to deceive this woman? You're a paralegal. You know better. You're at the Bronx District Attorney, the Brooklyn, let me correct that, the Brooklyn District Attorney's Action Center, and you're trying to deceive a little old lady into believing that she can sign away her civil rights because she signed a lease. And he's like, didn't you? Didn't you? I'm like, that's it. We're done. I'm going straight to civil rights attorneys. This is unbelievable. So what we did to put a stop to this is we had to go, when the local boys lie, we went to the United States Attorney's Office. So in New York, I filed a complaint with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and then yesterday I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Newark and I asked them for help, and I said, we need your help.
Oh, that's why you came to Newark.
Yeah.
I thought it was to go to a council meeting.
No, I went to Newark because I filed a complaint, and 75% I said, we need your help. This is a copy of the complaint that I made to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn. 75% of Newark's population is tenants. We're out. Yeah, that's how fast it went.
Wow.
See? Now you have to come back.